Thank you for staying up to now. My name is Chen-Yu, and I've just graduated from USC, and then I will go to MIT as a postdoc, and then I will start to teach at UVA CS department from next fall. So my research is about online learning. It's about the interaction between learner and an environment, and they have a repeated interactions. The learner in every round picks an action, and the environment will have some feedback to the learner. And in this talk, I will focus on bandit feedback, meaning that the feedback is like the reward for the chosen action. So as an example, the learner is like a recommender system, and then it can recommend Apple to the user. Then the user will have some feedback for the item that you recommend. But the recommender system will not know the feedback for the items that it does not recommend. And because of this reason, bandit feedback together with the non-stationarity will have some challenge. And what do I mean by this? So consider a user which has a preference over different kinds of movies, but the preference will change over time, as you can see from the picture. So if I'm a recommender system, I will recommend the user with some movies. And you can see that the cross are like recommender's choice. So in the beginning, it will explore the two kinds of movies, but it then soon finds that the user like romance movie much more than a horror movie. So it will, at the later phase, it will just recommend the romance movie. And because it does not observe the feedback for the horror movie, it does not find that it becomes better. So we can see that this is not good. And the solution for this is that the system has to have some extra exploration for those actions that looks very bad before. So you can see there are two kinds of exploration. One is the initial exploration, whose goal is to resolve uncertainty. And the principle of this is like optimism in the face of uncertainty. But the extra exploration is also needed for the non-stationary case. The goal is to discover changes. And similarly, if the feedback is some adversarial corruption, okay, the situation is very similar. There are a brand that is actually good and the other is actually bad. But if there are some fake ratings inserted for this good item, so in the beginning, well, if the recommended system is not aware of the possibility of the corruption, it will make some false decision in the long run. The solution is, again, you need to have some extra exploration to correct those previous corruptions. So we can see that for a corrupted environment or non-station environment, there are an amount of initial exploration and the other amount of extra exploration. And the more the non-stationarity or the more the corruption, the extra exploration should be more. But the challenge is that how to use the right amount of exploration without prior knowledge on the amount of corruption or the amount of non-stationarity. Yeah, so this is actually a challenging problem for limited feedback setting. So if you don't use the correct amount, you may suffer from over-exploration or under-exploration, which both hurt the performance. So there are several works in my PhD study that try to address prior knowledge related issues. And I will mostly talk about the first, and if time allows, I will talk about the third, but I will actually give a 45 minutes talk next week for the third paper. The first one is about multi-arm bandits. I think this is a protocol that most of you might be familiar with. And in each round, the environment can choose a reward vector, which could be adversarial chosen or from IID distribution. And the learner chooses an action and observes the reward. And we look at the regret. For this problem, there are two or two kinds of famous algorithms. One is Thompson sampling and UCB algorithm, and the other is an EXP3 algorithm. For Thompson sampling or UCB, it has a very good performance when there's no corruption, but the performance soon degrade to linear in T, and there's a small amount of corruption. On the other hand, EXP3 will have a square root T regret, no matter how much is the corruption. But you can see that in order to achieve the good performance, you have to have a prior knowledge about the corruption in order to choose a suitable algorithm. So this is not prior knowledge free. To address this issue, there are several works that gets a best of both worlds. But you can see from this curve, it's still not so satisfying because it's optimal for the two extreme, but it's not smoothly interpolating between the two extreme points. And what we find is that if you use a very simple algorithm that is on linear descent plus log barrier as a regularizer, you can actually achieve a smoothly degrade performance between the two extremes. And this is like the regret bound. It's parameter-free and prior knowledge free. So in this work, our contribution is that actually this on-linear descent plus log barrier regularizer is not firstly studied by us, but our contribution is that we discover the power of this combination in terms of a best of both world problem and adaptivity against the corruption. And there are also important improvements over our work, including Zimmer and Selden's seminal work and Ito's work. And Selden, Julian Zimmer will actually talk about his paper next week. Okay, so now we go beyond multi-arm bandit and study reinforcement learning under corruption. The protocol is like we study a finite horizon, fixed horizon MDP. In every round, the environment will decide whether to corrupt MDP in the current episode. Then the learner will interact with this MDP for one episode. And the episode will include edge steps. The regret is the best policy total reward and minus the learner's total reward. And let's define C as the total number of corrupted episodes. Different from the multi-arm bandit case, where square root C is possible. In the MDP case, you need to, the lower bound has a linear term in C unless you want to pay an exponential in H regret. Okay, so what are the known results in previous work? When C is known, you can achieve the optimal bound very easy. Okay, but if C is not known, this problem is first studied by Theodoris et al. You can see that all the bounds is not optimal. And our contribution is that we bridge the gap between the known C and unknown C case through a reduction. Actually, in our paper, we designed a meta algorithm, which gives the reduction. And the input to the meta algorithm is the near optimal regret, an algorithm with a near optimal regret under a known C. And you can turn it into an algorithm that has near optimal regret under unknown C. So this bridges the known C and unknown C case. And the idea of algorithm is to run multiple base algorithms with different hypotheses on C. This idea has come from previous work. And then we perform some careful model selection procedure. Okay, so as I said, I will skip this one. And the summary is that if you have limited feedback, like in bandit setting or RL, and you have unknown power of adversary or unknown environment change, it's very tricky to find the optimal amount of exploration. And our goal is to try to match the performances of the unknown case to the known case. And our results is like close the gaps and develop some general tools that deal with this kind of problem. And finally, I want to summarize with some of my interests. So my PhD study is mostly about reinforcement learning, bandits, online learning and learning games. And what I try to explore recently are about like several offline problems and control problems. And there are some new areas that I learned in this program. So I also hope that somebody can chat with me about these topics. And thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
So I was wondering, when you're saying that the arrivals are sort of stochastic with corruption, there may not be a unique way to look at the process in hindsight and figure out what was the stochastic part and what was the corruption part. Or like if somebody told you there was a slightly different stochastic process with a slightly different corruption bound, you may not be able to distinguish between these two models. So do you have a sense of like, it feels like the bound should really depend on some kind of complexity measure of the process. And do you know if there are any attempts towards doing that? Or?
I don't know. Okay, I'm not sure. So what you mean? We can, maybe the learner cannot tell the difference between the
right. So I can imagine all your bounds would be true for any stochastic process plus corruption, which would in some sense explain your process. And so simultaneously, like you're actually getting you're getting the best of many different bounds, which suggests that there's something just special about the input itself. Like there's some complexity of the input which will lead to what the right bound is. And I have no idea how to even define this, but I don't know.
I don't.
Okay, that's why it's a question.
Yeah, it's not so clear to me. Let's discuss offline.
Okay, any other questions? I know it's been a long day, long and hot day. Last call. Well, of course, there's a reception right outside, so you can ask questions there to all the speakers. So yeah, let's thank the speakers of this session again. Also a shout out to all the speakers today. I think the quality of talks and the works they presented was all consistently high and inspiring. So thanks everyone for the lovely talks. And we will have the second installment of that tomorrow, just in the morning. So just 2 sessions tomorrow morning to round this off. So again, thanks everyone for the lovely talks and the audience for attending. And there's a reception right now. So please stick around for that.
Sorry, that didn't answer your question.
I drew all the things, but I